Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for links to some great online retailers. There's also individual links for knives that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I want to talk about the Rat 1. This is going to be kind of a re-review and kind of a discussion topic, this knife. The last time I did a video on the legendary Ontario Rat, right? And we're going to include the Rat 2 in this, even though I don't have one out here today. This knife was the king of budget knives for so long. And there's going to be people who disagree. I don't like the Rat, I like the... And that's fine. But if you were to take a vote from the entirety of the knife enthusiast community, right? People who regularly on the forums, on Instagram, or, jumping around different YouTube videos. 5 years ago, if you were to take a vote, right? Maybe 3 years ago, somewhere in that area, this thing would have gotten the most votes by a landslide. And that's because there wasn't nearly as much competition in the budget knife world. We weren't getting, the elements, in the budget world that we're getting today. 2020 has been an absolutely insane year for budget knives. We're seeing things in budget knives now that were absolutely exclusive to the $100 to $200, or in some cases, $200 to $300 tiers of the knife world years ago, right? So this thing is undeniably still popular. This thing still sells like crazy. I think that's why they have left it alone. The Ontario Knife Company has left this thing alone and has not updated it for so long. But there are things happening in the budget knife world that tell me that this guy in its current form is it's on the downhill slope, right? It's going to lose its popularity, but there's still a lot of good here. I want to talk about it, what I think about it now versus 2019 and back when the channel started, closing in on 3 years ago. This is actually the third time that I've reviewed it, and it's interesting to return to this, get my thoughts on it. Right, compare and contrast. And then I'm going to offer a couple of things like what I'd like to see in an updated model of this. Because this knife, as you can tell, has been well loved by me. It has been beat on. It has been resharpened multiple times. It doesn't have a tip because of something stupid I did with it here recently, right? This thing has absolutely been through it. Is this knife a good user? Is it durable? The answer is yes, right? Yes. But the knife enthusiast in me looks for more than just a functional cutting tool, right? I have infinite choices for a functional cutting tool. There are other things that I look for now as a knife enthusiast. I will link this guy right down in the description. I'm going to be comparing this with, I think, a good one. I haven't reviewed this knife yet. This is the Civivi Ortus. This is a $40 knife that is just about perfect. This is one of the very best budget knives that exists, right? I'm going to be making small comparisons here. And not that it compares perfectly with the Ortus, right? There's a lot of budget knives that I could compare to. Just don't have them all here. But the Civivi Ortus is a good representation of where the modern budget knife world is at, right? And why some of the design elements here could be considered outdated. So I'll link this guy right down in the description as well so you can check it out. Thanks so much to my generous patrons who are supporting me right now. If you are enjoying the daily knife content and you'd like to support this channel, there is a link for Patreon right down in the description. You can get some stickers and other cool stuff. And please follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. We're going to do some quick measurements here. I'm not going to do the full review thing. I want to get into the discussion real quick. Of course, for anybody who doesn't know, this guy is about 8.6 inches overall. The blade length is about 3.6, and the cutting edge is about 3 1/4, something like that. The knife comes in at, considering we've got a blade stock thickness of, I think, about 120 thousandths. I'm not going to get too into this. Steel liners, and then we have this nylon, these scales that are not G10. This comes in at 5 ounces, right? So, the ratios are not bad, and they weren't considered, they were considered a lot better, I think, 5 years ago or so, when this thing was at, whenever the peak of popularity for this thing was. Truthfully, I picked this exact one up just about 2.5 years ago, and it was kind of, I wouldn't say exactly at the time where, there were other knives that were in competition with this, absolutely. It was not reigning supreme with zero competition when I picked it up, but there was a time where it basically did not have competition. And it was right around the time that they decided to put D2 steel on this knife, right? Originally, this knife came in AUS 8. And a long time ago, AUS 8 was considered this space age amazing stuff, right? It's okay, it's fine, right? D2, now that was a steel that we were seeing, like Benchmade was using D2 in the $100 to $200 mark, right? There are a few knives out there, I think, using D2 at smaller price points. Then this guy comes out, an updated version, right? It's the exact same knife, and it comes out in D2 for $40, right? Or 45, something like that. Holy crap. I remember people losing their mind over it. D2? We can get D2 steel for 40, 45 bucks, right? Large guy in D2 is 40 right now. Large guy in AUS 8 is 25. Small guy, the Rat 2 in D2 is about $37, $38. And the smaller one in AUS 8 is something like 23, maybe 25. I don't know. I'll link all of them down below, right? They're still good tools. They're worth picking up. I'm gonna guess that 1 in 3 people watching this video probably own this. It's probably not that much, but you guys, right? There's a lot of you who are thinking, yeah, my Rat's like, in that drawer somewhere, right? Everybody freaking has this knife because people just went crazy for it because it was such a big deal that you could get this thing in D2 steel back then, right? A lot of people now are probably like, what's the big deal about it? I can get D2, right? That's where that comes from. That's why these things are all over the place, why everybody seems to have one in their collection, because it used to be a big deal that you could get D2 steel for $40. And reports of the heat treat were okay. It was work. I don't think people were as concerned about, the potential variance in heat treatment. We have heard a little bit of information out there suggesting that not all Rat 1s and 2s and D2 steel are equal, right? We're seeing some variations in heat treat, and I think that oftentimes that comes with a lower price point, right? It costs more money to make sure that every single blade is heat treated exactly the same way. I think D2 optimally should be heat treated around 61, 62 Rockwell. It's not always the case with these guys, right? So sometimes there's, what we've heard is maybe there's not that much of a difference between the AUS 8 blades and the D2 blades. This guy seems to do okay. I'll admit, I will use this for pretty much anything. It's cut through bags of shingles, and the edge has been drug across things that will dull it no matter how perfect the heat treat was. So I've never really had an opportunity to test. I haven't gone out and absolutely tested, how long will the edge, hold up against cardboard or something that's a little bit more measurable, right? I've just sort of beat it into the ground, and I've always been impressed with it because it's always managed to lock up solid, right? The thing periodically comes off center, and this is pretty normal for this knife, right? A lot of body screws. I could probably adjust things and get it perfect. But anyways, yeah, I guess the brief history there on the Rat. So what is it that I like about this knife? What is it that I don't like about this knife? This knife is, it's not something that I would consider to be super thick. What they have, what's still a good thing, here is that the edges are nicely rounded down. This, a lot of people still are like under the assumption that this is G10. No, this is not G10. It looks like peel ply textured G10. It's just peel ply textured nylon. The texturing is, I think when you first get it, it might have a little bit more traction. My hands and where I've used this have basically sanded anything, any hint of traction on this thing. It's basically completely smooth now. But that's fine because the ergonomic lines absolutely do lock you in, right? This knife feels good. It is a joy to use in hand. And it's a joy to hold. It's comfortable, whether you're wearing gloves or if you're not wearing gloves, right? It's fine. Everything's chamfered nicely. Fit and finish on this guy's okay, right? Don't expect it to be absolutely perfectly centered. I think it's fairly common, for people periodically to get one that is not perfectly centered. Where are these made? They're made in Taiwan, right? Taiwan is not China. I know a lot of people, just lump them together. No, not. Geographically, politically, Taiwan is not China. They also have a reputation for having a little bit of a higher standard when it comes to manufacturing, generally speaking. I don't know that it really translates with this guy. I'm hearing that these things are still being manufactured exactly like you pick one up today, it's probably going to be roughly about the same as this, right? The thumb studs are, easy to engage. I used to use this thing as like a point of, reference for a perfectly placed thumb stud. Honestly, the thumb studs are pretty good. If I probably would have given them like an A+ a couple of years ago, but now after handling some other things, right? And by the way, if you're new to my channel, I review budget knives, I review expensive knives, I review full custom knives. I've got about 1,400 uploads, all comprehensive reviews of, popular stuff that not a lot of people know of or know about, right? I've handled a stupid amount of knives, just a crazy amount of knives. There's lots and lots and lots of reviews, of other knives that would be, a good comparison with this, right? If you want to hear my thoughts, my more recent thoughts on stuff like thumb stud placement, right? I think this thing could be, slightly better positioned, maybe a little bit forward. The whole thing actually could use an overhaul on the handle design and the placement of the thumb stud. I'll tell you my thoughts here is that the primary position for your hand, and this is a complaint that's been around for a while, you can see how far away we are from the cutting edge. But you can choke up. Yeah, you can. You can choke up. But this isn't a comfortable position to choke up in. Here's an example of a knife that made much better use of this whole area. And what's funny is that the Ortis has somewhat similar cutting edge. We're probably looking at a 1/4 inch difference in cutting edge, right? But it's a much smaller, much lighter weight knife, right? This whole area here. This, I can still get a 4-finger grip on the Ortis, right? Again, the Ortis isn't the perfect knife to compare it to, but just to make a point here, you have a choke-up position right here, a better choke-up position, one that's more, made for the human hand. And then you still have a very competitive cutting edge, right? There's not much that I can do with this knife that I can't do with this knife, right? So something like making better use of the space on the handle, right? If we're going to talk about a hypothetical upgrade for this knife, which God, I would go for. If they brought, they basically took the Rat and they evolved it and turned it into a modern budget folding knife, right? There's a few things that I'd keep, but there's definitely things I'd change. Number one, on this big guy, right? If they're gonna keep it the same overall length, which honestly I don't think they need to. I think an 8 1/4 version of this would be better. Shortened up handle. I don't want a flipper tab on this guy. There are some budget knives, there's a bajillion budget knives out there that have the flipper thing down. Leave the thumb stud idea alone. Maybe change the position of the thumb stud a little bit higher. Get that thing backed up here. Change the handle. Give us a forward choil so we can choke up behind this blade, right? The handle could be shortened up. You can make better use of this area up here, and we don't need all of it. We've got, even the standard position, we've got a lot. My hands are slightly larger than average, right? Which means the vast majority of people just don't need that. Even if you have larger hands than me, you just don't need that much handle, right? This thing is just, it's too much handle for, this much blade, right? So that's kind of my thoughts there, is that this area right here is kind of a problem area and it's just too much, right? And the thumb studs could be more optimally placed and probably, I don't know. I mean, they're not hard or anything like that. They're not pokey. It's pretty easy to deploy. Right, you can even do I think I can still do the reverse flick on this guy. Yeah, you can, right? The blade, I love that the blade is flat ground. Let's go ahead and take a measurement here on the blade. Let me get where's my calipers? There they are. Blade stock thickness on this guy is 120 thousandths. So there you go. I think the blade stock thickness is appropriate, right? That's it's going to lead to a decent edge. This isn't an absolute laser beam behind the edge, and I know I have resharpened it, right? Not an absolute laser beam behind the edge, but it does cut well. It's fully flat ground, right? It's just about a perfect utilitarian blade. Very, very versatile. Lots of different things you can do with this, right? It's got an appropriate amount of room to drop down to the edge. I found that it's nice. The edge doesn't seem to be delicate, but it's not overly thick, so it'll cut continuously. I'm happy with that. Spine up here. Honestly, if they redid the Rat, I'm going to say the same thing that I say about all budget knives. That spine, this area here is really sharp, right? So I guess if you're striking flint all day, you're good. But if you're in a situation where you're striking flint all day off the spine of a knife, you're probably carrying more than just this pocket knife, right? If you find yourself lost or stranded in the woods and the only thing that you have is your Ontario Rat 1, then in that very unlikely circumstance, I'm sure you'll appreciate that 90-degree sharp spine, right? But for the rest of us, even people out doing things like that with knives, right? On this knife, I'd like to see that knocked down. I don't think many people are going to be doing that with their knives. And I'm not saying that was the intended purpose. I'm saying that's why it bothers me. You can see how sharp it is just shaving my fingernails off. Is that a big deal? No, that's a really nitpicky reviewer just nitpicking, right? I'd like to see this knocked down. I'd honestly like to see the blade tumbled. We're seeing some beautifully tumbled blades, right? You know, I think it would look better than this. I'm starting to associate this satin finish on a budget knife with just, you know, just laziness and just get it out the door, right? I'd like to see a little bit of flair. You know, I'd like to see some nice even tumbling and some knockdown corners here. I think that would do the blade really, really good. I think the jimping is pretty good. Honestly, I don't know that it really needs any type of overhaul. I think it's fine, right? This runs on a combination of phosphor bronze and nylon, which gives it, honestly, a good snappy click. I really have not had to take this thing apart and clean it. It's been pretty darn good, and while I'd love to see it, you know, truthfully, in an upgraded version, I'd love to see it just on phosphor bronze. We do not need a bearing-operated Rat 1. Leave this thing, this is just me hoping and dreaming, right? That we see some type of upgraded rat, even if it is unlikely. It's just fun to talk about. If it was upgraded, I'd like to see it stay on phosphor bronze, get rid of the nylon, right? Even though, honestly, the nylon has not caused a problem for me, it would just, you know, it'd give me peace of mind that everything's nice and solid in there. And that a teeny tiny little grain of sand isn't going to tear my nylon washer and ruin the action, right? But the action's been pretty good. Very snappy, right? Let's talk about another problem area. This nylon or whatever. They could continue using. I mean, obviously, the Civivi Ortus. Civivi did a great job in this case with some FRN or nylon, you know, injection mold plastic, whatever. This looks pretty good. I mean, honestly, I thought this was G10 initially, right? And I've got a version of it in carbon fiber, which I prefer. Carbon fiber in Damascus, and it you know, it's going to cost more money. I think this is 80. This one's like 40, right? They could keep doing that. They could keep using materials like that. I'd like to see G10. I mean, we see G10, contour G10 from companies like CGRB and Civivi all the time. It'd be really nice, right? They could leave it flat. It wouldn't be that big of a deal just to kind of keep that classic. I mean, the idea here is if I'm going to hypothetically in my mind create an upgrade for the Rat, I'd still want it to kind of look like the Rat, right? It has this iconic look. It's kind of this weird humpback up here. Honestly, it's kind of an ugly knife, but I've come to appreciate that ugliness. I've come to want that ugliness to remain in essence, right? So, yeah, okay, they could leave that flat. I'd like to see G10. I think that would be nice. But if they left it this material, okay, whatever. It'd also be really, really great to see it contoured, right? We do see contoured G10 in Absolute. I mean, here's again another example, right? The Ortus, which is the convenient example that I have here right now, contoured, right? They could do that. All of the, like, literally, we need all of these screws gone, except for the two body screws. There doesn't even really need to be screws for the stop pin. The stop pin can simply be slotted into the liner, and it'll all be held together essentially by the combination of the pivot and the two at maximum body screws. We do not need 1, 2, 3, 4 standoffs, right? Stop pin is the stop pin. It's not a standoff, but they've opted to hold it in place with screws, right? So yeah, we don't need that. Backspacer or 2 standoffs, couple of T8 screws, not T6. This is a big problem with this knife. Way too many T6 screws go all over the place. If you strip one, well, okay, then you got to strip, right? It sucks. Lanyard hole. Do we still need lanyard holes in 2020? I don't think so, but if they really want to put one on there, it needs to be in a different position. There can be a slotted, or like a milled out standoff, right? And you could attach a lanyard, and then it's totally, you don't have to worry about where are we going to put the pocket clip, because the lanyard hole is so important for all those people who use lanyards, right? No, you can just, the pocket clip can be moved up higher, right? This thing doesn't carry super deep as it is, right? Pocket clip can be moved up higher. This can be back here, right? Rick Hinderer knives, they put it way back here, and it's just fine. It's totally out of the way. or you could slot a standoff, right? Move this clip up. Honestly, the clip's pretty good. This down here does that thing where it goes whoop and then straight, right? So if your pocket seam is thicker or taller than the height from the scale to the bill or the clip, then you're going to fight it. Clip needs to look more like this. Continuous ramp so that you can push it against the seam and it will rise to meet the same level of thickness. Why is that important? Because you can get it in and out of your pocket with one hand. Every now and then I have to fight this thing, right? Clip design's okay. The 3-hole thing's fine. Moving it up here, and we're going to carry something like this. If the pocket clip was moved up because we didn't have to worry about this freaking lanyard hole back here, it'd carry about at my preference, right? Everything's fine here. This pocket clip has always been good. It just needs to, the bill down here needs to be changed, right? And if they do it correctly and they round off these edges here, then it won't create a hot spot. It'll be as good as it currently is. I like that there is, of course, options for tip up, tip down, left or right-handed carry. With this thing being a thumb stud operated knife, you can, in my opinion, it's safe to carry it in whatever position you like to carry your knife in, right? That's totally okay. Happy with that. The pivot, never really had a problem with the pivots. Honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, it's been so long since I've taken it apart, I have no idea if the pivot is captive or not. I've just never, if it's not, I've just never had a problem with it, coming out. But I'd like to see, I think the modern, answer to this problem is we have one side that is just a show side, right? It's just the pivot barrel, and the pivot barrel is D-shaped to fit a D-shaped liner. That way it's captive, doesn't turn, and then you have one side, doesn't matter which side, that we use to turn the pivot. And in this case, I think it is still is it T8 or is it T10? It looks like it's probably T10. It's just been so long since I've taken them. Yeah, it's T10, right? So yeah, that would be great. What I'm describing there is, and if they continue to use D2, then fine, but there's a lot of options for steel right now in this world. I think it would be really interesting to see it in something that was, stainless and maybe a D2 option, right? It wouldn't bother me if I saw this in 9CR18 MOV. If we saw it in, a freaking 154 CM. I'm going to tell you guys right now, exactly what I'm describing here, all the changes, right? And then a tumbled 154 CM blade, I'd pay $50 for that. I'd probably pay more for that. I'd probably pay $60 for that. And we see that steel sometimes in this realm. Kaiser Vanguard series for a point of reference, right? CTS BD1N, 14C28N, is that the Sandvik, right? A lot of different choices, right? It'd be interesting right alongside D2. They keep the D2, the cheaper one, and then you've got a couple of upgrades there with some steel. Yeah, I would definitely buy that. That would be great, right? But I think the people who are still hanging around, who didn't mind listening to my rambling, right? The reason I'm doing this is because I love the Rat. And I finally, 2.5 years ago when I bought this thing for the first time, I came to appreciate exactly how good of a tool it is. I think something I want people to keep in mind is that even if they don't upgrade this knife, right? People who are going ahead and spending $40 to get this, or, $37 to get the smaller one, they're still going to find that it's a very functional, very capable tool. And again, really, I'm going to drive this home. This thing is very durable. Extremely durable, right? This thing I have pride with this. I'll openly say I have definitely pride with this knife. Hard. I have used it as a hammer a couple of times. That's what those little marks are there, right? It's been thrown across concrete, thrown across shingles. It's fine. The lockup is seriously, I'm dead serious, guys. It's solid. It is still solid. There's no lock slip or anything on this guy. This is a durable tool. That, for some people, that's all they care about, right? For a lot of people watching my channel, if you've never handled this, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to buy that, right? I'm intrigued. You're going to get it, and you're going to go, boy, this feels sloppy compared to my, my nice Civivi knives, right? My nice CJRB knives, right? My Kaiser Vanguards, whatever. Yeah. Modern budget folding knife. This is the budget folding knife that was king 4 or 5 years ago, right? Both functional tools. This one has more of the satisfying elements, right? The flipper runs on bearings. bearings versus phosphor bronze, obviously there's pros and cons there, right? We don't need to discuss that, but yeah, this is going to feel more satisfying at $40 by a landslide over this guy, right? So some changes I think would bring joy to both people who are knife enthusiasts in the 2020 knife world, and people who just use their knives and don't really care for much of the fancy aesthetic, right? Some of these changes that I would suggest, right, like the minimizing of the hardware, that makes it much easier to disassemble the T8 screws, right? Shorter handle and better area up here behind the blade is going to make for just a more comfortable, way to position your hands while you're doing different types of tasks, right? Sharp corners, everything knocked down. I don't need to go over it again. But yeah, and I think it would breathe new life into something. It would be interesting to sort of, revive this thing or revitalize it. It would be really, really cool. I honestly don't foresee that happening anytime soon because, like I said, this thing is still very, very popular. There's even that one site out there that has like the custom rat builder where you can kind of build what you want, right? Put different finishes on it, whatever. It'll cost you a lot more money, right? Be neat to see, honestly, them, take this, evolve it, and then at the same time offer, again, lots and lots of different colors, right? Different blade finishes. It would be cool. I mean, it would just, honestly, that sounds like something that I would very much be interested in. But obviously, keep the essence here. Keep the essence of the Rat. So is the Rat 1 still worth buying in today's knife world? And the Rat 2, right? AUS 8 and D2, no matter what version. There's even an assisted version, I think, or there used to be. Is it still worth buying? Yeah, truthfully, if you're just looking for a functional tool, this is great. If you're just looking for a straightforward functional tool, coming from somebody who has beat the crap out of this knife, yeah, it's definitely going to stand up to it. It'll do it, right? If you're looking for modern elements, right? If you've been collecting some of these nicer budget knives, right, and you've got a taste for that, you've never experienced this is gonna feel real goofy. It's gonna feel real, just kind of poking along and just getting it done, right? That's what it's gonna feel like. It's not gonna feel graceful. It's not gonna feel satisfying. There are gonna be fit and finish issues with this guy. You're gonna see flaws with the liner. You're gonna see issues with centering, right? Maybe some people won't, right? But it is going to be functional. Speaking of functional, if they ever did a revamp of this, they really do need to get the heat treat thing figured out with D2. Not saying they're all bad; they're all okay, right? As far as I understand, it's just it needs to be, the heat treat needs to be figured out. We've got budget companies doing proper heat treats on D2 and this wide variety of other steels, right? If they're going to remain relevant and in competition, that's a must. That determines whether or not the steel is actually capable of doing what it was designed to do, right? It doesn't matter if it's D2, if the Rockwell hardness I'm not going to say that that's the case here, but if the Rockwell hardness is 54 on a D2 blade, it doesn't matter that they put D2 on it. It's basically butter attached to a pivot at that point, right? That's got to be worked out. I still love this knife. I've been tempted to buy another smaller one for myself, right? Or another larger one for myself for a long time. Been tempted to customize it. It's a good knife. But if it's going to remain in competition for, years to come, it's time for an overhaul. Absolutely. There are too many elements on this thing that I used to not care about, but now after handling, some better examples of modern budget folding knives, right? A lot of them. Like I said, I've handled a crap load of knives in lots of different price ranges. So I'd like to think I kind of know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. I think there's room for an overhauled version of this with some modern elements. I think that would be really, really cool. So I still recommend the Rat as a tool. Not as an enthusiast pleaser though. Like I said, I'll link it down below. I'll link the Civivi Ortus down below since I keep showing it off. And the review on this guy's coming. This is excellent, guys. One of the most excellent budget knives that exists. All right. 2020 for the Rat. Still chugging along. Doing all right. Needs to be upgraded. Guys, that's going to be pretty much it for today's discussion topic / re-review of the knife, or the rat for 2020. Please follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, there is, of course, other videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. Struggling through my outro. Jeez. And if you enjoy all my contents, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody.